accident at the time of liftoff. 4 minutes later, the second stage was fired. That increased the speed to more than 15,000 miles per hour. Then it too was cut loose. The third stage firing put the Apollo 11 into orbit around the Earth. When it was fired again, the third stage engine increased the speed enough to break the spacecraft free of the Earth's gravity and send it outward to its lunar goal. Then the command and service module, where the 3 astronauts were, was separated, turned around, and driven so it could lock up with the lunar module, the LEM. This is film of the Earth and the maneuvering that brought the 2 Apollo 11 vehicles together. The photography was done from the command module, that's the LEM, still carried inside the third stage of the Saturn, moving only slightly more slowly than the approaching craft that will dock with it and free it for its fabulous journey. This is a vivid demonstration of the laws of Kepler and of Newton, whose brilliant insights centuries before guided modern scientists on the paths outward from this planet. The most practical of Newton's discoveries for those involved in spaceflight is that the pull of the Earth's gravity falls off as the distance from the Earth increases, so a great blast is needed to make the first escape from the Earth, but very little power is needed to fly far out. That made the relatively tiny LEM practical. After the LEM was docked, the third stage was left as space refuse, and the vital remains of Apollo 11 moved inexorably into history.
Good evening. Well, this afternoon, another long television transmission highlighted by the first in-flight glimpse into the lunar landing module. And here's how it went, starting with a view of the hatch between the 2 spacecraft shortly before lunar landing module pilot Buzz Aldrin opened it.
About to open the hatch now. Right. There's that same guy that when you open up the doorway, he's waiting there for you and he turns the lights on. How about that? It's like the refrigerator.
That light is automatic like a refrigerator light. When the door opens, it turns on.
That conversation between Charlie Duke and Mike Collins referring to the automatic light that comes on in the LEM when the hatch is opened.
Hey, that's a great shot right there. We see you in there. Yes, that's Neil and Mike.
It's looking back up from the,
anyway.
Looking back up from the lunar module up into the command module. A wonderful shot. At this point, they were 203,000 miles from the Earth. The windows in the LEM, those 2 triangles through which the lunar module pilot, Buzz Aldrin, on the right, and when he is in the LEM, Neil Armstrong, the flight commander, on the left, look through. There you see the silvery form of the command module, in which a moment ago you saw Mike Collins and Neil Armstrong up through the docking hatch.
Buzz, that's a good view through the overhead. That's a great shot now that we're getting of the helmet, the EVA visor, and also the EVA gloves in the background.
The gloves can stand that 250-degree heat on the moon. These visors are to protect against the glare of the sun, which of course is not interrupted in any way by an atmosphere on the moon, so it is powerful.
11, you got a pretty big audience. It's live in the U.S., it's going live to Japan, Western Europe, and much of South America. Everybody reports very good color. Appreciate the great show.
And it protects against the impact of micrometeoroids, which also unimpeded by atmosphere strike the moon's surface and will strike the astronauts. These little tiny pin specks of meteor material at as much as 1,000 feet per second. High impact velocity like bullets from a gun. Greater than that, of course, by far.
Well, that's a good view of Mr. Collins down there. We finally see him again. Hello there, everybody. Hello there. 11, Houston, if that's not the Earth, we're in trouble.
For more than 90% of its long journey, the Apollo 11 continued to lose speed until it got to where the moon's gravitational pull exceeded that of the Earth. A 6-minute blast of its engine slowed the reversed craft and put it into lunar orbit. On July 19th, the day before the scheduled landing, the explorers circled the moon 12 times, carefully surveying the designated landing site, happily recognizing landmarks they had studied for months. From an altitude of 100 miles, they transmitted live television of the arid spectacle that was the target of their search and the focal point for many millions of armchair astronauts. The authentic astronauts stayed busy with household chores and equipment checks and a few hours of sleep. On the 10th orbit, after circling the moon for nearly 20 hours, Armstrong and Aldrin moved into the limb, tested all the systems and devices, and put on their pressure suits, the environments they would bring to the moon. At 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Sunday, July 20th, the longest scheduled program in the so far short history of television came on the air from a control room in this same building. It was to end 32 hours later at 7 p.m. Monday, July 21st. Early in that long broadcast, the astronauts of Apollo 11 would repeat many maneuvers done by other Apollo explorers through nearly 2 years of flights. As before, the lunar module would separate from the command and service module. Apollo 11 would become two vehicles, Columbia with Mike Collins and Eagle with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. This time, though, the LIM would move toward the moon with men intent on landing. An unprecedented trip to the unknown would take place, all of it reported live by radio from 250,000 miles away. And there were plans for live television transmissions from the moon when Armstrong and Aldrin walked there. An enormous audience was waiting.
Back in our CBS News space headquarters in New York, and we're approaching one of the critical moments of this flight. At 1:46 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and that should be just 2.5 minutes from now, the spacecraft should again come around the near side of the moon on its 13th revolution and be in touch again by telemetry, at least, the voice communication to come just a short while later with the Manned Space Center in Houston. At that time, the command module and the lunar module will begin undocking. The lunar module cutting itself free from the command module, beginning the maneuvers which in 2 hours and 32 minutes from now should place it on the surface of the moon. So on this acquisition of signal, Houston will be as tense as these cool scientists, engineers, technicians at Houston can get, waiting for this important maneuver, the undocking of the command module and the lunar module. And we'll stand by waiting to hear from Houston on that acquisition of signal.
Hello, Eagle, Houston, we're standing by, over.
The call to Eagle is to the lunar module. The command module's call word is Columbia.
Roger, Eagle, undocked. Roger, how does it look? The Eagle has wings. Roger. Looking good. Roger, Neil, we got a...
Again, a little poetic. The report that Eagle has wings. That's not bad. It is a little bit like leaving the nest, this lunar module leaving the command module. The lunar module, which itself cannot fly in Earth environment, land on the Earth, to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. It is truly a space vehicle. Can only operate in this gravity of the moon and in the moon's environment. Mike Collins in the command module takes a good look at the lunar module, checks it out by visual observation, advises the crew of the lunar module, Armstrong and Aldrin, that they look good, it is hoped, and advises the ground of that as well.
Particularly on the deployment of the landing gear, this is where they take a good look to see.
Do this without firing any thrusters, Mike?
What they're discussing here is the examination I just mentioned. Mike will look over the landing gear struts, each one in turn, to be sure they're properly fixed.
Right, Houston, Eagle is ready to copy.
And now separated, they should be seeing the Earthrise on the far side of the lunar horizon, 248,000 miles away. 5,200